Left alone in a dark room, I found a mysterious diary that unraveled my family's darkest secrets. With each page turned, I realized I wasn't alone after all. I'm 23F, and up until recently, I was super close with my family. Like, I'm talking about spending almost all my free time with them. I have two sisters, Leah, 30F, and Sophie, 28F, and a brother, Adam, 35M. They all have kids, for total between the three of them, and for the longest time, I was basically their favorite aunt/babysitter. I love their kids, though. Don't get me wrong. I genuinely did. And honestly, I didn't really mind helping out. I didn't have a social life or anything. So, when my siblings needed me to take care of the kids, I was all in. It felt like I had a purpose, you know? Looking back now, I think I ignored the fact that I was kind of their go-to person for everything when it came to their kids. It's like every weekend I was watching them or spending money, I didn't really have to take them out somewhere fun. My siblings, by the way, all have way more money than I do. Like, they're all pretty well off, especially Adam. He's got this fancy job and all that, but somehow I was the one always footing the bill for the kids' toys, snacks, trips to the movies, you name it. At the time, it didn't bother me. I thought I was just being a good aunt. But now that I think about it, was I being a good aunt, or was I just letting myself get taken advantage of? Anyway, things were going fine for years. I was babysitting all the time, going to their school events, taking them out on weekends so my siblings could have their own time off. I didn't have much else going on, to be honest, so it filled that gap in my life. I didn't have a big friend group, wasn't dating anyone seriously, so the kids were kind of my world. But then everything changed about a year ago. I had this freak accident. I tripped over something stupid in my apartment. I think it was a laundry basket or something, and I ended up really hurting myself. Like bad. I couldn't walk, and both my hands were messed up. Doctor said I was looking at 6 months, maybe more, of physical therapy and recovery. I went from being this super active, independent person to someone who couldn't even feed themselves. The first couple of weeks after the accident, I was still kind of in shock. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. But I figured, okay, my family's going to help me out, right? I mean, I was always there for them, always stepping up when they needed me. Now it was my turn to lean on them a bit. Boy, was I wrong. I was in the hospital for a couple of days after the accident, and I remember Leah came to visit me once. She stayed for like 20 minutes, and that was it. Adam? He texted me like, hey, heard you fell. Sucks. Get well soon. Sophie didn't even show up at all. Just sent a group text saying she was too busy with work, but hoped I was okay. That's when the first red flag started waving in my brain. But I tried to brush it off, thinking they were probably just stressed or busy or something. I mean, they've got kids, jobs, lives. I didn't want to be that person who expected too much from them, right? Then I got sent home, and let me tell you, I've never felt so alone in my life. You ever try living by yourself when you can't even walk to the bathroom? Yeah, it's not fun. I couldn't cook. I couldn't clean. Hell, I couldn't even brush my own hair. I had to cut most of it off because I just couldn't manage it anymore. I lost 30 pounds in those first few months because I couldn't even make myself food. The fridge was empty. I was living off crackers and protein shakes, and I was too embarrassed to ask anyone for help. And that's when I realized no one in my family was offering to help either. Before my injury, my phone would be blowing up with texts from my siblings asking if I could babysit, pick the kids up from school, or do something for them. After the accident, radio silence. Not one called to see how I was doing. Not one offer to come over and bring me groceries or just check in. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I had to rely on my next-door neighbor, Nancy, who I barely even knew, to pick up some food for me a couple of times. This woman who didn't know me from Adam was showing more kindness than my own family. It was around the 3rd month of being stuck in my apartment, unable to do much of anything, that it really hit me. They only cared about me when I was useful, when I could watch their kids or do favors for them. I was the best sister, the best aunt. But now that I needed help, crickets. That realization messed me up more than the accident did, honestly. I'd always thought we were a close family, but the second I couldn't be their free babysitter anymore, they didn't even bother checking in. I started to feel more and more angry as time went on. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt at first, like maybe they were just busy or stressed or something, but after months of nothing, it was pretty clear where I stood with them. There were days where I just sat in bed, staring at my phone, hoping one of them would call. Maybe just to ask if I needed anything or to see if I was okay, but they never did. And it wasn't just the physical pain, that it was the emotional pain of realizing that I wasn't as important to them as I thought I was. All those years of me going above and beyond for their kids, spending my weekends and money, thinking I was building this strong bond with my family, it all just felt like a lie. By the time I started recovering and was able to walk again, I was mad, really mad. I started thinking back to all the times they called me up, asking me to watch the kids so they could go on a date night or take a break, and I realized they never offered me that same kind of support. Not once. It was like they just saw me as their built-in babysitter, and the second I couldn't fill that role anymore, I was useless to them. So after everything that happened with my accident, you'd think my family would have realized how much they'd messed up, right? Like maybe they'd notice how distant I was being and at least try to make things better. But no, nothing like that. They were still acting like everything was totally normal, like I hadn't just gone through one of the hardest times of my life without them. After I started to get back on my feet, physically at least, I was still dealing with a lot mentally. I had all this anger just boiling up inside me. I didn't know how to bring it up without starting a huge fight, so I kind of just waited to see what would happen. But one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going back to being their personal babysitter. That part of my life was over. Then one day, I get this call from Sophie, the middle sister. She's all casual like, hey, the kids really miss you. Do you think you could take them for the weekend? I swear I almost threw my phone across the room. After everything, the first time I hear from her is because she needs me to watch her kids. Not even a, how are you feeling? Or, we haven't seen you in a while. Are you okay? Just straight to asking for a favor. Like, are you serious right now? So I told her flat out no. I'm not babysitting anymore, at least not for a while. I figured that was the easiest way to start setting some boundaries, you know? I didn't want to dive into the whole, I'm mad because you abandoned me conversation just yet, but I needed to make it clear things had changed. Sophie didn't take it well. She acted all confused, like she couldn't understand why I was saying no. She even tried to guilt-trip me by saying how much the kids missed me and how hard things had been for her lately. Now, normally that would have worked. I used to be a total pushover when it came to them, especially the kids. But not this time. I stood my ground and told her that I needed to focus on myself for a while. She got all huffy and was like, well, I just didn't realize you were so busy now. Busy? I'd been recovering from a life-changing injury for months, completely alone, and now I'm too busy for her? That phone call pretty much confirmed everything I'd been feeling. They didn't care about me unless I was useful to them. After that, I decided I needed to have a real conversation with all of them. Like sit them down and just lay it all out. I wasn't going to keep pretending like things were okay when I was still hurting, both physically and emotionally. So I texted Leah, Sophie, and Adam, asking if we could all meet up for lunch at this cafe we used to go to. I thought it'd be a good neutral spot to talk things out. When the day finally came, I was nervous as hell. I didn't know how they were going to react, but I knew I couldn't just keep all of this bottled up anymore. So we all sat down, and at first it was just small talk. They were laughing, catching up, acting like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I was sitting there trying not to explode. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore, and I just said, we need to talk. That's when things got awkward real fast. I told them how hurt I was that none of them had been there for me during my injury, how they completely disappeared when I needed them most. I didn't hold back. I told them how lonely and abandoned I felt, and how it made me realize they only seemed to care about me when I was useful to them. I was shaking while I said all of this, but it felt good to finally get it out. Leah was the first one to speak, and her response made me want to scream. She said, well, you never asked for help. We just assumed you were fine. I was stunned. Like, did they really need me to beg for help? I couldn't walk. I couldn't even cook for myself, and they knew that. It wasn't a secret. I said, why would I have to ask? You saw me in the hospital. You knew I couldn't even get out of bed. Then Adam chimed in, all defensive. He said, we all have our own lives, you know. It's not like we were just sitting around doing nothing. And that's when I lost it. I told them I had spent years putting their lives and their kids ahead of my own. I gave up my weekends, my money, my energy to be there for them. And the one time I needed something in return, they couldn't even bother to call. I told them I wasn't going to be their babysitter anymore, and that from now on, I was setting boundaries. Leah looked pissed. She was like, so you're just going to cut us off? You're going to punish the kids because we didn't check in enough? That's when the guilt tripping really started. They kept bringing up the kids, saying how much they missed me, and how they didn't understand why I wasn't around anymore. But I wasn't going to let them guilt me into going back to the way things were. I told them straight up, this isn't about the kids. This is about you guys treating me like I don't matter unless I'm doing something for you. And that's when Sophie finally spoke up. She tried to play the peacekeeper, saying, we're sorry if we made you feel that way, but you didn't tell us how bad things were. I couldn't believe it. They were still making it sound like this was somehow my fault for not spelling it out for them. I just sat there shaking my head. I shouldn't have to beg my own family to care about me. At that point, I realized this conversation wasn't going anywhere. They weren't going to see things from my perspective, and they definitely weren't going to apologize or admit they were wrong. So I got up and left. As I walked out of that cafe, I felt this weird mix of anger and relief. I was pissed that they still didn't get it, but I was also relieved that I'd finally said everything I'd been holding in. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was putting myself first, and honestly, it felt good. After that conversation at the cafe, things between me and my siblings just went downhill. I mean, it was already bad, but now it was like we were all on totally different planets. No one was willing to see my side of things, and I sure as hell wasn't about to back down. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself, and I wasn't going to let them guilt trip me into going back to being their personal babysitter. A week or two passed after that whole mess, and I didn't hear a word from any of them. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was kind of expected, but still it stung a bit. You'd think after I poured my heart out, they'd at least check in to see how I was doing, but nope. Silence. And honestly, that silence spoke louder than anything else they could have said. But then, out of nowhere, Adam called me. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to pick up, but curiosity got the best of me, so I answered. He didn't waste any time with small talk or anything. He jumped right into it, like, so you're really done babysitting for us? Is that it? I could already tell this wasn't going to be a nice conversation. I said, yeah, Adam, I'm done. I told you guys that already. He just sighed, and then said something that completely floored me. Leah and Sophie are thinking about cutting you off from seeing the kids. Now, I know my siblings can be selfish, but I didn't think they'd actually go that far. I was shocked. I asked him, are you serious? They're really going to use the kids against me because I won't babysit anymore? Adam, in his usual blunt way, said, well, they feel like if you're not going to help out, then why should you get to hang out with the kids? It's a two-way street. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So now I had to babysit just to be allowed to see my nieces and nephews? I was angry, like really angry, but I didn't want to let Adam know that. I kept it cool and said, look, I love those kids, but I'm not going to let you guys use them as pawns to get me to do what you want. If Leah and Sophie want to keep me from seeing them, that's on them. Adam didn't seem to care much either way. He just kind of shrugged it off and changed the subject. He started talking about his new job, how he was traveling more, and how tough it was balancing work and family. It was like he didn't even realize how messed up the whole situation was. I kept the conversation short, and when we hung up, I felt this weird mix of emotions. Part of me was heartbroken, thinking about not seeing the kids anymore, but another part of me was just done, like I couldn't keep doing this with them. The guilt, the manipulation, it was all too much, and if they were really going to punish me by keeping the kids away, then fine. I wasn't going to play their game. A couple more weeks went by, and then I got another call, this time from Sophie. She sounded super sweet, which was already a red flag because she's only nice like that when she wants something. She goes, hey, so I've been thinking and the kids have been asking about you. They really miss you. I was wondering if you could maybe take them for a day next week. Just a day, nothing big. I promise I'll pick them up early. I almost laughed. She was doing exactly what Adam had warned me about, trying to get me back into babysitting by dangling the kids in front of me. But I wasn't falling for it. I told her, I miss them too, but I'm not babysitting Sophie. I told you this. Her tone changed immediately. She went from sweet to pissed in about 2 seconds flat. I don't understand why you're being so selfish. You used to love spending time with them. And now what? You're just too good for us? Too good for the family? That hit a nerve, but I kept calm. It's not about being too good for anyone. It's about respect. I've given up so much for you guys, and when I needed help, no one was there. I'm not going back to being the person you call when you need something. Sophie wasn't having it. Fine, do whatever you want, but don't come crying to us when the kids don't even remember who you are. And then she hung up. That call hit me harder than I expected. I sat there for a while, just thinking about what she said. Was she right? Were the kids going to forget me? I had spent so much time with them, been there for every little milestone, every birthday, every scraped knee. It felt like I was losing them, and it hurt. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't go back to how things were. I tried to distract myself after that. I threw myself into work, tried to reconnect with some old friends, even started going out more. It felt weird at first, having time to actually focus on myself. For years, my whole life revolved around my family and their kids. And now that I wasn't involved anymore, I didn't really know what to do with myself. But slowly, I started to figure it out. Then, a few weeks later, I got the call that really broke me. It was Leah, and she sounded panicked. She said that her youngest, Emma, had been in an accident. Apparently, she'd fallen off her bike and broken her arm. Leah was rushing her to the hospital and needed me to watch her other two kids while they dealt with everything. My heart sank. I love those kids, and the thought of Emma being hurt made me feel sick. But at the same time, I knew what this was. They only called me when they needed something. When they were in a bind, I was suddenly important again. I didn't know what to do. I felt guilty for even thinking about saying no, but I also didn't want to fall back into the same trap. So I took a deep breath and told Leah, "I'm sorry Emma's hurt, but I can't help right now. I hope she's okay." There was a long pause on the other end. Then Leah said in this cold, distant voice, "I can't believe you. After everything, you're really going to do this? I thought you cared about this family." And with that, she hung up. After that call with Leah, I honestly felt like the worst person in the world. I just kept thinking, what if Emma's really hurt and I'm sitting here refusing to help? But then I had to remind myself, this wasn't my fault. This was a pattern. They only called me when they needed something. If it wasn't for the accident, would Leah have even reached out? I seriously doubted it. Still, the guilt was eating me up, so I texted Leah later that night. I just sent something simple like, "I hope Emma's okay. Let me know if you need anything." But surprise, surprise, no response. It was like they only wanted me around when it was convenient. And the second I set a boundary, I was dead to them. A few days went by, and I started hearing bits and pieces from other family members about how my siblings were really upset with me. Apparently, they were telling everyone that I had abandoned the family and that I didn't care about them anymore. It was wild. I couldn't believe they were twisting things like that. I wasn't the one who abandoned anyone. They did that to me when I was at my lowest. It all came to a head when my dad called me. Now, my dad isn't really involved in all the day-to-day drama. He's more of a let's keep the peace kind of guy. He calls me up and says, "We need to talk, kiddo." The minute he said that, I knew I was in for a lecture. We met up at his house, and as soon as I walked in, I could feel the tension. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table, and I could tell he was already stressed. He didn't even offer me coffee or anything. Just got straight to it. He goes, "I've been hearing from your siblings, and they're really hurt by the way you've been acting." I wanted to roll my eyes so bad, but I kept it together. "Dad, I don't know what they've been telling you, but I haven't abandoned anyone. I'll just stop babysitting." "That's it." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't really on my side. "I get that you've been through a tough time, but family's family. You know how it is. Sometimes we have to do things we don't want to for the sake of the people we love." I couldn't believe it. My own dad was basically telling me to suck it up and go back to being their unpaid babysitter all for the sake of family. I tried to explain how hurt I was, how they hadn't been there for me during my recovery, but it was like talking to a brick wall. He just kept saying things like they didn't mean to hurt you, and everyone's busy with their own lives. By the end of that conversation, I was so frustrated. I could barely see straight. My dad just didn't get it. He wasn't around enough to see how much I was bending over backward for my siblings. And he sure as hell didn't understand how abandoned I felt when they all ghosted me after my accident. He ended the talk with some classic, "Just try to work it out, kiddo. They love you. They really do. But love isn't treating someone like they only matter when it's convenient." After that, I stopped talking to pretty much all of them. It felt like the only way I could protect myself was by creating distance. I couldn't handle being around people who didn't respect me enough to treat me like an actual human being with my own needs and boundaries. So I blocked Leah and Sophie on my phone and deleted our group chat. Adam, I left unblocked because honestly he wasn't the worst of the three, but I wasn't exactly reaching out to him either. Then came the hardest part, the kids. I didn't want to cut them off completely. They had no idea what was going on, and it wasn't fair to them. So I reached out to one of my nieces, Natalie, who's 12 and old enough to have her own phone. I sent her a message, just asking how she was doing and telling her I missed her. She responded pretty quickly, saying she missed me too and that she'd been asking her mom, Sophie, why she hadn't seen me in so long. That broke my heart. I didn't want the kids to think I just up and disappeared from their lives. But at the same time, I couldn't let myself get dragged back into being their go-to babysitter again. So I told Natalie that I loved her and her cousins and I was always here for them, but things with the family were kind of complicated right now. She didn't really get it, but she said she understood, which I appreciated. Kids are way more understanding than people give them credit for. After that, I made it a point to stay in touch with the kids directly without going through Leah or Sophie. I'd text them or send them little gifts every now and then just to let them know I was still thinking of them. It wasn't the same as spending time with them, but it was the best I could do under the circumstances. A few months went by like that. I was still kind of figuring out who I was without my family constantly needing something from me. I started hanging out more with some coworkers, going to the gym again, doing things for myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life. But of course, nothing stays calm for long in my family. One day, I get a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick it up, but something told me I should. Turns out it was Leah using a different phone to call me since I'd blocked her. Real mature, right? She starts off with, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to stop ignoring me. No hello, no how are you? Just straight to the attitude. I told her I wasn't ignoring her. I was setting boundaries, and if she didn't like that, too bad. Leah wasn't having it. She started going off saying how the kids were suffering because of me, how they missed me, and how I was ruining the family. She even had the nerve to say, "You're being selfish. You need to get over yourself and start acting like part of this family again." That was it. I'd had enough. I told her, you know what, Leah? Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you all took me for granted for years, and now that I'm finally standing up for myself, you don't like it. She tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I hung up the phone and blocked that number too. After that, I knew there was no going back. I wasn't just taking a break from my family. I was done. Done with the manipulation, the guilt tripping, the constant demands. If they couldn't respect me or my boundaries, then they didn't deserve to be in my life. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty anymore. After blocking Leah for good, I honestly felt like a weight had been lifted. It was the first time in forever that I wasn't waking up stressed about when the next call or guilt trip would happen. I could just breathe. My days were my own, and it felt like I could actually focus on my life for once. But of course, it didn't stay quiet for long. About a month after that last blow-up, I got a letter in the mail. I don't get much mail besides bills, so I was surprised to see something handwritten with my name on it. When I opened it, I saw that it was from Sophie. She had written this long, dramatic letter about how disappointed she was in me and how I was tearing the family apart. It was full of the usual guilt trip garbage about how much the kids missed me and how I was letting them down. She even had the audacity to say, "I hope one day you realize how selfish you're being and that it's not too late to fix this." Like, seriously? I was selfish? I gave up years of my life for them, and now I'm the selfish one because I don't want to be their doormat anymore? I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. I didn't even have the energy to get mad about it. At that point, I was just done with all their manipulation. If they wanted to paint me as the villain, fine. Let them. I wasn't going to waste another second of my life trying to prove myself to people who clearly didn't care about me unless they needed something. Around the same time, I got an email from Natalie, my niece. It was sweet, and she kept it casual, just telling me about her school and some stuff going on with her friends. I was glad to hear from her. I always told the kids they could reach out to me anytime, and Natalie was the only one who actually did. But something in the email caught my eye. She mentioned that her mom, Sophie, had told her I was too busy to see them anymore. Too busy. That was the lie they were telling the kids? I couldn't believe it. Instead of being honest and saying that there was some family drama, they were making it sound like I just didn't want to see the kids anymore. Like I was off living my best life, and I didn't have time for them. It pissed me off, but I knew I couldn't take that anger out on Natalie. It wasn't her fault, so I responded to her email, saying I missed her and that I was always here if she needed me. I didn't bring up her mom's lie. I didn't want to drag Natalie into the mess. But it made me realize that this situation wasn't going to get better. My siblings were going to keep twisting things to make me look like the bad guy, and the kids were stuck in the middle of it. After a few weeks of stewing over it, I decided to make a final, clean break. I had to, for my own mental health. I couldn't keep playing this game with them, where I was constantly on edge, wondering what lie they'd tell next, or when they'd try to guilt me into coming back. So I changed my number again, blocked any emails from my siblings, and pretty much cut all ties. It hurt like hell, especially thinking about the kids, but I knew it was the right thing to do. The funny thing is, once I made that decision, I felt this huge sense of relief. It was like I could finally see clearly. For so long, I've been caught up in trying to keep everyone else happy, always sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for the sake of family. But family shouldn't make you feel like that. Family should support you, lift you up, not tear you down or use you when it's convenient. It wasn't easy, though. There were nights where I'd lie awake thinking about all the times we spent together. Holidays, birthdays, the laughs, the inside jokes. It's not like I didn't love my family. I did. But love isn't enough if the people you love don't respect you. That's the part one had to come to terms with. Then, out of nowhere, about 3 months after I cut them off completely, I got a message on Facebook from my mom. I don't talk about her much because she's never really been involved in the day-to-day drama with my siblings. She lives a few states away, and we've always had a kind of distant relationship. But she must have heard about what was going on because her message said, "We need to talk about what's been happening with your siblings. They're worried about you." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. Of course, they were worried now that they couldn't reach me to dump their problems on. I debated whether to even respond, but I figured it was worth at least explaining my side of things to my mom since she wasn't directly involved. I told her everything. How I'd always been there for my siblings, how they completely abandoned me when I needed help, and how I had to set boundaries to protect myself. I didn't sugarcoat it. I wanted her to know exactly why I had made the decisions I did. She took a few days to respond, but when she did, it was surprisingly supportive. She said she understood why I felt hurt and that she wished things had gone differently. But then she dropped the line that kind of threw me. Maybe it's time to forgive and move forward. Life's too short to hold grudges. That's when I realized something. This whole time, I've been holding on to this idea that my family would eventually come around, that they'd see what they did wrong and apologize, and we'd all move forward. But that wasn't going to happen. They didn't think they did anything wrong, and they probably never would. So, I made peace with it. I wasn't going to forgive them because they hadn't asked for forgiveness or shown any remorse. But I was going to move on. I wasn't going to let their toxic behavior control my life anymore. And that's where I am now. It's been a few months since I cut them off for good, and while it's still hard sometimes, I know I made the right choice. I've started reconnecting with old friends, focusing on my career, and doing things that make me happy for once. I don't know what the future holds for my family, or if we'll ever truly make amends. But for now, I'm at peace with where things are, and that's all I can really ask for.